are now at a beautiful cemetery that is located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Take a look at all these beautiful headstones and markers and monuments. The leaves are changing colors and falling. What a beautiful day to be in a beautiful cemetery. This one was founded way back in 1878. It's a beautiful place. We got a lot of stuff to show you here, and we cordially invite you to come along for the adventure.
Come along. We are now at the Mercer family plot. It was around Christmas time when Jenny Mercer was excitedly waiting for her son to return home in 1914.
That's right. Her son's name was Robert Mercer. You see his grave right there. Behind Heather is Jenny's grave right there. Robert was working at a construction company. He was a contractor. They were working on building the courthouse out in Cleveland, Ohio. Now his mom called. The supervisor said, "Hey, where's my son? He's not here yet." He said, "Well, I assumed he went home for Christmas." And she said, "He never made it home." So they began a manhunt searching for Robert. Mrs. Jenny Mercer made her way to Cleveland, where she actually used her own money to pay for a part of Lake Erie to be searched near the area where her son was last seen. Several weeks went by with no signs of Robert. Eventually, Mrs. Mercer was able to get in touch with Detective George F. Mercer, who was a distant relative. She told him she had an intuition her son was still in the City Hall building that was under construction. Just before crews were going to pour cement over the dirt floor of the basement, Detective Mercer got permission to do a dig there. During the dig, police discovered the body of Robert Mercer in a shallow grave in the basement. He had been badly beaten and robbed before being buried there. Mrs. Mercer drove her son's body back here. No one was ever charged with his murder. She lived another 23 years after his death.
We are now checking out the mausoleum for Henry John Heinz. He started a horseradish business at the age of 25.
That's right. That business was a complete and utter failure. It fell apart on him. But his second business was not such a failure. He started making tomato ketchup. And of course, later, it became known as the H.J. Heinz Company out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was just 25 years old when he started his horseradish business. He came up with the idea to sell horseradish out of clear glass bottles so potential buyers could see the purity of the product. This was an idea that served him well later in the ketchup business. People really liked his horseradish, but the price of the herb fell so much in 1875 that he had to give the business up. Then, in 1876, he started a new business. The first product he created was a brand new type of ketchup using what he described as only the finest ingredients. 20 years later, he came up with the slogan 57 varieties, even though the company was already past 60 varieties of products it was creating and selling by that point in time. He just had always liked the number 57. Hines died on May 14, 1919, here in Pittsburgh from pneumonia. The first line of his will said, "I desire to set forth at the very beginning of this will as the most important item in it, a confession of my faith in Jesus Christ as my Savior." Here is the grave of Charles H. Cooper. He was born in 1926 in Pittsburgh.
Charles liked to be called Chuck. He was the first African American to be drafted to the NBA.
That's right. In 1950, he made history when the Boston Celtics used their second-round pick to choose Charles Cooper. Chuck didn't think he'd be drafted in the NBA, so just months before the draft, he signed with the Harlem Globetrotters. He left his spot on the Globetrotters to join the Celtics. Other teams heard rumors the Celtics were going to select Cooper. Many of them contacted Celtics owner Walter A. Brown, telling him not to draft Cooper because he was black. Brown famously responded by saying, "I don't care if he's striped, plaid, or polka dot. Boston takes Charles Cooper of Duquesne." He died on February 8th, 1984, of liver cancer.
We are now at the grave of Henry Clay Frick. He is buried next to his wife, Adelaide.
They are both buried under a layer of cement. This was at Henry's request because he didn't want anybody messing with his remains. Another interesting thing here is you'll see all the way around the Frick grave area, there are a row of bushes. Now, bushes and fences are not allowed in this cemetery. He got around it, though, because a relative was on the cemetery board. Frick partnered his H.C. Frick Coke Company with Andrew Carnegie's Carnegie Brothers Steel Company in May 1882. He was strongly against organized labor and wouldn't allow union workers to have jobs at his mines. This led to the Homestead Strike of July 1892, where 10 men were killed and 60 others were injured. Also that month, a Russian anarchist attempted to assassinate him. Frick wrote his wife and Carnegie saying, was shot twice, but not dangerously. All this explains why he wanted to be buried under the cement.
We are now at the grave of former police officer Calvin M. Hall. He was off duty at a block party in Homewood on July 14th, 2019.
He was there with some family members. He actually had left the party and came back. It's interesting. He's got, looks like his family right here on his headstone. He had left and come back because his cousin called him and said there was an altercation going on with some women down there at the party. So he came back to try to help out. He got into an argument supposedly with a man named Christian Bay. He left, came back to apologize to the gentleman, but apparently the gentleman did not accept his apology. As the officer was walking away, he was shot multiple times in the back. According to authorities, that was done allegedly by Christian Bay. He died 3 days after the shooting on July 17th, 2019. His headstone says, "I was here."
We are now paying our respects to Rebecca Knox Carpenter. She has an obelisk that has her name, Rebecca Knox, right on it, and her nickname is on the other side of it. Reba.
Before this time period, people were often marking children's graves, people who died young. Now, she died at 5.5 years old of typhoid fever. So normally they would have been marking people with a little lamb or a sleeping baby or even a crib. But it was around this period of time when she died where they started switching over to smaller versions of what adults have. Now, if you notice, J.B. Hill's obelisk is that big one right up here behind me. For children, they did them in a much smaller size. This one is only about 3 feet tall. Reba died on September 24th, 1884. Her obelisk says, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." Her dad was a lawyer who later became a judge, and she was the first person to be buried in the Carpenter family plot.
Perhaps the most famous grave in here belongs to Malcolm James McCormick. You may know him better as Mac Miller.
Of course, he was a hip-hop star. He died way too young of a drug overdose. Now, he was buried in an unmarked grave, apparently in the Jewish part of the cemetery, one of the Jewish parts of the cemetery. There are some videos on YouTube that think that he's buried right here, and perhaps he is. Of course, we don't know. They don't know. Nobody knows. But this is a possibility. This cemetery is near the home Mac Miller grew up in, which is the house his mother still lives in. He once said of this cemetery, "We used to hang out in the cemetery at night when no one's there." He also shot part of his music video for Nikes on My Feet in this cemetery as well. We know for sure he's buried in this cemetery, and there are several reasons to believe this could be his grave, including the fact his final album, which was released posthumously, was called Circles, so the headstone may be a nod to that. Also, this area lines up alphabetically with his mother's last name of Myers, and this is in the area of Lot 18, which is the lot he is rumored to be buried in. Plus, he was buried in an unmarked grave, and we didn't see any other unmarked graves in this area.
Wow, the weather is wonderful, and this cemetery sure is beautiful.
What a gorgeous place. Another one that if you're in Pittsburgh, you gotta come check out the Homewood Cemetery. And also let us know, what graves did we miss? Tell us. Or what interesting things do we miss in here as well? Tell us in the comment section below. Y'all be sure to hit the like button, smash the subscribe button, and ring the notification bell so you can come along with us on future adventures.
Come along.